Hello and welcome to the Cyber Distortion Podcast Season 4, Episode 3. Tonight, Kevin and Jason talk with Wes Kussmaul. Wes brings 3 decades of experience in the development and management of secure online spaces to his work at Reliable Identities. He is a security and personal privacy advocate with decades of experience on the topic. In 1981, Wes founded Delphi Internet Services Corporation and its Kussmaul Encyclopedia, the world's first computerized encyclopedia, an early example of hypertext. In 1989, Delphi became the first to bring the internet to mass audiences. Wes is the author of several books about privacy and authenticity, including Quiet Enjoyment, 2004, Own Your Privacy, and The Future Needs You, both from 2007, and Don't Get Nortelled for 2014. This episode, appropriately entitled Hackers Love You and Your Overshared Instagram Posts, will be very educational and eye-opening. Enjoy the show.
Welcome, everyone, to the Cyber Distortion Podcast. This is Season 4, Episode 3. It has been stated that the most crucial step in engineering is defining the problem correctly. We all know there is no place that this is more true than in the world of cybersecurity. Security is a constant balancing act between simplicity and adaptability, and effectiveness and accuracy. At every decision point, trade-offs emerge: security versus privacy, public versus private, national versus local, and many others. To understand security, you've got to grasp the big picture, and you need to understand the details. Every detail matters. Why are details so important? Well, that's what we aim to explore tonight in our conversation with our special guest, Mr. Wes Kussmaul. Jason, let's welcome our guest to the discussion tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to tell you, this is going to be a fun topic. You know, we play around with this topic often. We talk about, the world of the internet and cybersecurity and how those things play together very well, or don't always play together so very well. And we look at it from different takes. And I think tonight's going to be yet another different take on how we go into this topic. So, Wes Kussmaul is a pioneer in internet technology as the founder of Delphi and is currently the president of the Authenticity. I can't even say that right. Authenticity Alliance, and the CEO of Authenticity Institute. Wes is an author of various books, including Quiet Enjoyment and The Future Needs You, Kevin, you, which we'll get into in a few minutes. So, as well as Wes's thoughts, we're going to get into his thoughts on where technology is headed in regards to privacy and authenticity. So, Wes, I know you have some pretty hot opinions about cryptocurrency, and we're going to dive into that a little bit too. We're going to talk about that. But first, I want to issue a warm welcome. Thank you for joining the show. Thank you for being part of what we're going to talk about tonight. And why don't you introduce yourself a little bit further?
Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to this session with you and talking about ways in which identity is a critical component of security, and ways in which we can deliver both privacy and security at the same time by using proper identity tools.
Yeah, so we've got a lot to cover, and identity, privacy, how your information is used in the different sources that you're using it on. Those things are also super important. And so I'd like to start off with the simple premise of understanding that, is often ignored these days when we are doing things online and going about our daily activities. And it is the common assumption that everything we do on the internet is safe. There's nothing to worry about. You can do whatever you want. And I say that now as I think about the past and where we've come from the past to where we are today. The starting point of this gradual concern around how to use this technology way back in the 90s to where we are today, where no one even thinks twice about it. I mean, most often someone sends you a link and you're clicking on it on your phone and you're joining up for something you don't even know what it really is, right? So when we are at that point of delusion around our willingness to ignore our the need to keep ourselves safe and how to keep ourselves safe, it becomes a bigger concern. And so likewise, that's why as cybersecurity professionals, we like to dig into this topic and talk about the essence of why this is so important. But to give you a perspective, right? Most people underestimate the prevalence of data breaches and hacks. We know this because we constantly preach about how widespread this is and how often this happens. An episode we recorded a few weeks ago had a former military, highly trained cybersecurity expert who has a company who was sharing his thoughts around how vulnerable our critical infrastructure really is, and people not really fully understanding that. And he's sharing that, within the next 5 years, he believes there's going to be a major attack on our critical infrastructure systems. As we go further than that, I want to give you a few stats. So in more than 70% of cases, breaches can be traced back to organized crime groups. And I don't think a lot of people realize how much the activity that is happening in attacks are related to organized crime in nation state actors that are happening, in adversarial nation state actors. So 70% of those can be traced back to organized crime groups. The average time to contain a breach was 64 days in 2024, which was 9 days less than what it was in 2023. And this tells you that we're getting better at stopping some of these things, but we're not fast enough. And now with the advent of AI taking over and how you can use AI to do things, that coin is going to flip into the opposite direction if we don't also improve on our tactics. Another note here, breaches that use stolen or compromised credentials took the longest to resolve at 88 days. And so that's also one of the most common ways that breaches occur is through compromised credentials. And most often you reusing credentials on multiple sites and not having a strong credential base or MFA base in place. And then 91% of cybersecurity professionals reported an increase in cyber attacks due to remote working. And so if you start to look at when we started to go into remote, in this remote workforce back in 2000 to where we are today, the landscape of attack vectors has changed and has become more opportunistic as a result of having more people working in remote capacities with weak security practices in place. Lastly, 63% of companies have implemented a biometric system or plan to implement one. What this tells you is that identity is still at the root of most breaches. And so we're trying to figure out how to lock down an individual's identity better so that it doesn't result into breaches. So, Wes, you've observed a lot of things in the cybersecurity landscape. We talk about all these stats all day long, but why don't you share some of your thoughts around where you see some of this at?
Well, thank you, Jason. What occurs to me when you mention biometrics is, okay, how do you do biometrics? To my way of thinking, there are two correct ways to do biometrics and one really wrong way. And unfortunately, the wrong way seems to be getting traction. So the right ways are at enrollment, creating a record with biometrics, with iris, with fingerprint, palm print, and sealing that, encrypting it, putting it away. It's an enrollment record. The second correct way is to use a biometric to release a private key for use. I am a very strong believer in PKI identity credentials, where the private key never leaves your device. You talked about stolen credentials. Well, to steal a PKI credential, you've got to get the physical device. And even then, if the private key, the use of the private key is gated by the biometric, you've got to steal the finger or the eyeball to make use of that identity. And attached to that identity certificate, since you want to, these days, we're all relying parties, right? We think of our bank as a relying party, our employer as a relying party. We authenticate to an institutional network of some sort. Well, no, we Venmo each other. We share files with each other. We meet people online. We're always dealing every day with people we really haven't encountered in the physical world. I have employees that I've never met face to face. In fact, that's been true for years. So there needs to be an identity reliability component attached to that identity certificate, that key pair, that, the digital identity certificate with accompanying private key. NIST, I guess around 2006, launched its 800-63 set of methods for assessing the reliability of an identity claim. And over the years, the gathering of what we call EOI, evidence of identity, has gotten pretty thorough, but they still, in fact, they've taken a step backward. It used to be you'd get a grade of 1, 2, 3, or 4 on an identity claim, like how reliable is this identity claim? But to synchronize with the European standard, the European EIDAS standard, they went down to 3. So you can attach an identity reliability score to an identity claim that is part of an identity credential, of course. But if the score is 1, that means it's a self-asserted identity, meaning, okay, well, it's pretty useless. A 2 is such a wide range of identity reliability gatherings of EOI, evidence of identity, that, man, it's not that useful either. I mean, you got a 2. Is it a good 2 or a bad 2, you know? So you're left with a 3. If you got a 3, that's pretty good. You can pretty much rely on a 3 claim. So we took that whole idea of gathering evidence of identity and figured that there are 8 metrics that can be used to measure the evidence of identity that a user might claim. So we score each of them on a scale of 0 to 9. So you get an aggregate score of 0 to 72. The relying party can look at the component scores, those 8 component scores. If one of them is more important to them than another, then they have that data, they have that information. So PKI identity credentials with a measure of the reliability of the identity claim attached to it. Now you got something, and I think that's the key to solving a lot of these problems. Certainly, synthetic identities, and then of course you've got the problem of trackability. People feel as though the more they assert their identity, the more they're making themselves trackable. We use the license plate model or number plate, depending on the terminology you use where you live. Your license plate, your number plate, makes you accountable on public roadways, but nobody gets to know the identity of the driver or owner unless there's been an incident. There's been a fender bender, or the cops suspect you of transporting drugs or something illegal. In which case there is a mapping between the license plate, the number plate, and the driver's license. Now, of course, that implies an authority. In this age of decentralization and disdain for centralized authority, that gives us lots to talk about. But authority can be done well or it can be done badly, and we try to answer that by doing it well. So
even some of the points that you're making are really important too, because as you're talking about it, what was bringing it up for me was thinking about 2 parts. One, you need the majority of the industry to follow a common practice where identity access management is done in a highly secured way. Claims, tokens, public key, private key sharing, but eventually what you have to have is an individual's identity needs to be tokenized. And if the tokenization of the individual's identity can be rotated, so that, but the claim on that identity is managed, then you get into a challenge where you don't want that claim to that identity being centralized. You want it to still be decentralized, which will require multiple entities to be able to manage that under a common protocol or practice. And that's where we fall a little short, because at the end of the day, right, if my identity and anything I used online was always just tokenized, I'm just sharing a token, and the authorization of that token is managed through a service provider or multiple service providers, that to validate that I am who I am, to be able to access whatever I'm going to access, That's all that would be necessary. But the problem is you don't have the consolidation of these service providers who are capable of all taking that token and having an authorization of who I am to say that I really am that person. And that's where it breaks down at. So you have a lot of CIAM providers who say, hey, we can connect to your application and we can provide this for a application, or we can do this in a SSO environment for an enterprise organization. But that's isolated. That's still centralized in some respects for that organization within what they're doing in that unit of work, or the entities that are connecting to the applications that they're servicing. That does not go across to other sources or other applications using the same type of tokenization models. And that's where we start to have a little bit of a challenge. I think, I don't know how we get there that way. Like, how did you take an identity and just make it random numbers, right? That's kind of where the challenge starts to fall. And random numbers in such a way that can be rotated, refreshed, but not losing the authenticity of who that person really is.
That randomization and that tokenization is going to be the trick, but also that third-party validation. There has to be a third-party entity in there to confirm that an impartial opinion as to your legitimacy, right? It's like,
you guys know the story of StartCom?
No.
The StartCom?
StartCom was a certification authority. So StartCom was that impartial third party, a commercial certification authority. We actually were investors in StartCom. So we're very close to this.
Really?
StartCom did a particularly good job of running a certification authority. That is, they did bother to really vet the identity claims of the owners of domains, website operators. Are you really who you say you are? And we gained market share steadily over the other participants in the certification authority business, the commercial business. So we developed this reputation for integrity, and that became an asset. And then one day, now I say we were, long story, we used their expertise in building our Osmio certification authority. We started out in that direction. But we were minority stockholders. So when management decided it's time to sell the business, we said, hey, wait a minute. We're kind of depending on you guys. Who are you selling to? And will we continue to be able to work with the new owners? Anyway, what happens? What happens when a business with a particular strong asset puts itself up for sale? Who does it attract? What buyers, what bidders does it attract? Well, the answer is it attracts bidders that lack that asset, right? In this case, the asset was an integrity asset. Who is attracted to this commercial enterprise with an integrity asset? Naturally, a buyer that lacks that integrity asset.
Yeah.
So StartCom was purchased by a Chinese company. This is all public record. I'm not disclosing anything here. That set out and purchased it with the intent of issuing fraudulent certificates. The CA forum caught them pretty quickly, much to their credit. I have to say, much to their credit. They saw what they were up to quickly, and their whole investment went to dirt. We did okay. That's the good side of the story. You only get 7 times our money back, but and some other investors I brought in did pretty well too. But you know, you can't have a certification authority that can be bought and sold. That's like offering to purchase the vital records department at City Hall, right? You can't buy it. It's not for sale. I mean, the mayor may be for sale, but you know, the vital records department knows that all they have, their only asset is their integrity, the reliability of those birth certificates and death certificates and other vital records. So yes, there's a well-known decentralization advocate that we're always quoting. His name is Lawrence Lundy Bryan. He was with Outlier Venture. He's a partner at Outlier Ventures. He's moved on. I don't know where he is now, but anyway, he's also a kind of a governance junkie, and he's famous for saying there is no such thing as decentralized governance. You need a central authority that everyone agrees to trust. You have to have that.
Therein lies the challenge, right?
I think that we've made a big attempt to solve that challenge, because on earlier this month we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the chartering of a digital municipality at ITU headquarters in Geneva, ITU being a unit of the United Nations, of course. I was with, where do I start with this story? I was writing, is my book visible there? You know, one of my books, I was writing the book that this book is based on, Quiet Enjoyment. And some people at the ITU approached me and said, hey, you know, we're kind of building what you're advocating in this book, a global PKI. With a global identity PKI to facilitate commerce. They said, you know, we're the economic development group at the ITU, and you know, business people in developing countries don't have a trust infrastructure, and they could use that. And they brought me in, and I said, hey, guess what, guys? It's not just the developing world that needs a trust infrastructure. It's the whole world. It's anybody who exchanges money or credit or reputational information with anyone needs a source of trust. So I worked with them for a while. We came out with the World eTrust Initiative. That was the PKI system. We rolled it out in 2004 to the member states of the ITU, and they hated it because they felt it was a big threat to their national sovereignties. There are 180 nations about represented at the ITU, and you know, like we have our certification authority, we have our national identity program, and are you saying that our CA is going to be subordinate to this global CA? And we said, yeah. And so they said, well, pull the plug on the thing right away. Get rid of it. In fact, I had a guy, I gave a talk to, and this is available in video, to the year 2008, and years later to the UN World Summit on Information Society about OSMI, about certification authority. And this guy came up to me after the talk, and he, you know, said a few things about what I said. And then they said, Wes, do you know why we came down on World eTrust Initiative the way we did, why we killed it? And I said, well, I do have an idea. But go ahead, let me know. Because technically it's because the only initiatives coming out of the ITU are from the member states, that the administrative staff doesn't initiate anything. Well, that's BS, of course. But the real reason was what I just said. All these member states felt, this guy said, listen, Wes, when the internet first came along, we saw that as a massive threat to our sovereignty. He said, this World e-Trust initiative is like the internet, like internet squared. We hate it. I said, well, yeah, that's what I figured. Anyway, the two leaders of the World e-Trust initiative took me aside and said, Wes, we don't want this to die. We have to, the ITU can't do it anymore. We've got our orders, but will you take it? And that was very courageous on their part. So on March 7th, 2005, the city of Osmio, OSMIO, was chartered at ITU headquarters in Geneva. It's a certification authority. It's a PKI certificate, identity PKI certification authority. If you want a source of authority that you can trust, that's it. And nobody compels it. It's not part of the internet. It's not part of the SSL system or anything like that. It's for those who choose to trust it, even though, anyway.
But you're speaking to the same thing I was talking about, is forming something that can be that centralized, authoritative position that can be useful. The challenge there is then people adopting into it and not doing their own thing.
Exactly. And you can't force it. You can't say, you have to accept this source of authority. But we've done a lot to satisfy the concerns of the privacy activists, the decentralization advocates. So one thing I mentioned was the license plate credential, only we just changed the name to number plate credential because apparently that's the term more people use. So it lets you assert your identity without disclosing your identity, just like your car's license plate does. Makes you accountable on public roadways, but nobody gets to know your identity. And you can have, just as you can have as many cars as you want on the road so that people don't recognize that your Ferrari is owned by the same person as owns your Lamborghini or your Toyota.
Or your Pinto.
Or your what?
Or your Pinto.
Or your Pinto, right. That gets a little costly, but in our system, you can have as many number plate credentials as you want.
So it's pretty much a registered identity.
For different personas, so you can be one persona on a dating network saying you don't really want your employer to know that you're, you don't want to use the same persona in your employment as you do in the dating network, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, eBay. So you create as many of these persona certificates as you want. That's one solution. Here's the other one. So ID certification authority has a database, right? Database of certificates. Well, this particular identity database has no identity information in it. We call it the Internet of People protocol. You are enrolled by a Virginia notary. Virginia was the first state to have remote online notaries. So there's a human being who is civilly and criminally liable for their accuracy in establishing that you are who you claim to be. The identity of that attestation officer, it's called, from the Council of Attestation Officers, is recorded in the database. So if someone comes along and says, this person using this persona stole from me. They defrauded me, a pig butchering scam, something like that. And I need to know who it is. Or law enforcement says, this person's dealing drugs. We need to know who it is. Or a dictator says, this person has been saying critical things of my wonderful regime in their blog. I need to know who it is. Well, that attestation officer will require a court order from a court of competent jurisdiction, and she'll take that first court order and say, yeah, this guy's been my valued customer has been defrauding people. Here's his identity. The law enforcement court order, same thing. Yep, they got him dead to rights. He's dealing acid, Here you go. Here's their name, and here's where you can find them. The third one, attestation officer says, oh, you don't like what he's been saying about you because, and you got a kangaroo court to issue a court order. In the trash it goes, right? I mean, it's all up to the attestation officer with the backing of the Council of Attestation Officers. The attestation officer says, I got this court order. I don't want to be the only one saying it's valid or not. I need an opinion from the management of CAO, and they give it. So that's how we try to answer head on the concerns of the decentralization community. You need centralized authority, but there's centralized authority done right. Oh, the other thing is the governance of Osmio is participatory. So we use a system called optimocracy. It's a municipal governance structure because it is a digital municipality. It's governed by commission, which a lot of cities are. Anybody can join a commission. Anybody can participate in the debates on an issue in a commission, but you only get to vote on the issue. When it comes to a vote, you only get to vote if you have participated.
Oh, sure.
Oh, that's interesting.
So you have to have been there. You have to, there's synchronous and asynchronous debates, and, each commission could do things their own way. But there are quorum calls for synchronous. Even if you've been just listening and not talking, you still have to say, yeah, I'm here. The moderator can ask questions to establish that you've been following the debate, and if it's an asynchronous discussion, you click and acknowledge that you've been reading and following the debate. So those are the three means we use to really, because the concern about centralized authority is very valid. So
for sure.
Yeah. Wow. That was really fascinating.
If we can, I'd like to shift gears a bit back into the whole privacy thing. And, you guys, you've probably both seen The Social Dilemma and heard stories similar to that in the real world. But we all know, every one of us, unless we go out of our way not to do it, we're leaving a digital footprint behind us with everything we do, whether it be posting on social media, subscribing to newsletters, leaving reviews, shopping online. We're always leaving some sort of a breadcrumb to who we are, right? And every time you go to a new website, we get annoyed by the pop-ups that we see. Hey, are we okay to track you? Are we okay to place cookies in your browser? We all know most people are going to see these things and they're just going to move right past them. They're going to be like, get this thing's in my way. I need to just accept all, and then get this thing out of my way so I can get on to business, right? And I think that's one of the biggest problems today in society is we're in instantaneous mindset. We need answers quickly. We need to get past all the BS that's in our way. Unfortunately, because of that, I feel like everybody's kind of ignoring security. And, we don't realize when we go to these websites and we say yes to these things. I mean, when I say we, I'm saying that not the three of us, but generally people don't realize what they're doing when they just say yes to that stuff. And what we don't realize is the companies that we say yes to now have our information. Now they can track us. Now they can follow us. Now they can place those cookies and monitor our activities and sell information about us. But what I'd like to really dig into a little bit deeper is the types of breadcrumbs we're leaving behind. And most people don't realize that there's a couple of different types of digital footprints. There's active footprints, and those are the ones where you deliberately share information when you're posting on a social media site or participating in forums. You're leaving that breadcrumb actively. But there's also the passive side of it, and that's when information's collected about you without you being aware of it. And this is what happens when you say yes to some of these pop-ups, or when your browser IP address is being tracked, and things that you have allowed to happen because you said yes to some of these pop-ups. So, Wes, I'd just like to ask your opinion. What should we be doing? Jason mentioned something earlier. He said 70% of all breaches can be traced back to organized crimes, right? What's happening to this data? When this data is being stolen, or this data is being resold out on the dark web, because we know that's what's happening. They're tracking all this information, they're gathering this, and then it's just being resold. But why? Why do people care to have that about us? What's the value in all this information, these digital breadcrumbs, so to speak?
So the cliche is that it's about buying habits, and that's part of it. That's one of the reasons why why it's collected.
So it goes back to marketing then, right? They want to come back and resell information.
Well, it's all marketing, but what are they marketing? Okay. Are they marketing bed sheets and scooters for kids? Or are they marketing membership in an echo chamber of some sort? And here's where the real profit is. Yeah, sure, you make some money by collecting purchase habits and demographics, and this person is likely to buy a fur coat because they go to these, whatever stores.
They go to Neiman Marcus.
What's that?
They go to the Neiman Marcus website.
They go to the Neiman Marcus website, or they don't hang out with PETA or something like that. I don't know. But the real money is made in learning your beliefs and opinions and affiliations, and gating the information that you see through the use of botnets, troll farms. There's a 2-minute video, less than 2 minutes, by someone named Sutton Smith, who tells how these things operate. She's not in the business anymore. She's now an actress. In fact, she's on a popular series now, but she spilled the beans in this. Sutton Loves, she goes by Sutton Loves on X and Instagram, I think. But her real name is Sutton Smith. I have a video of her talking about this. Anyway, how the tools of, it used to be propaganda, but propaganda is too weak a word. I call it Goebbelsology after the, World War II propagandists. You will wake up one day and all of a sudden everyone's talking about this one thing. And you think, oh, that's a new thing on the net. No, someone's paid to put that into your brain. And you now believe that all of your friends and all the people you care about think this certain way. And so, what's this all about? You want to learn more about it. You find yourself in an echo chamber. You find yourself in a club with some very strong beliefs. And this echo chamber is designed to get you to believe that the only truth is what comes through the club. I mean, it sounds like a cult, right? Oh, it's got a lot in common.
Yeah, very much. I mean, is the ultimate goal there, though,
Well, I'm getting to that. Okay. Here's the psychology of the echo chamber. When you're in there, you tend to trust everybody in there, including the advertiser of diet supplements and miracle cures for dread diseases and amazing investment advice. It ain't cheap, but we know that these stocks, this cryptocurrency is about to explode,
Yep.
And you impute trust to those advertisers in your echo chamber. And their products and services are ridiculously overpriced. That's where the money is made. And all it costs is, your soul. You're now buying into a set of beliefs that call for you to reject any information coming from outside of that echo chamber.
Mm-hmm. So they're preying on your gullibility.
Well, they are. The only thing is that you don't have to be particularly gullible. So I call it Goebbelsology. There's Goebbelsology 1.0, which was this guy, the inventor of public relations. I can't think of his name right now. But he wrote the book entitled, he coined the term propaganda, wrote a book entitled Propaganda. Goebbels read that book and said, hey, I could sell Hitler with this stuff, which he did. And he didn't even have TV to work with. So add TV, add social networks. And the latest version of Goebbelsology was created by none other than Yevgeny Prigozhin, the creator of the 3 St. Petersburg troll farms. And you don't have to be particularly gullible. It's just the nature of what do you know other than what you are told? I mean, you have your sources of information, and if all your sources of information are telling you that the Venus is on the other side of Mercury, Venus is closer to the sun, you've been lied to, and you hear that from all over the place, you say, oh my God, I've been lied to.
The Earth is flat.
The Earth is flat.
Yeah.
The Earth is flat. That's Goebbelsology in action. I almost think it was a prank. They said, it was a bar bet in Russia.
Let's see how many people we can get.
I bet you I can get 100,000 Westerners to believe that the Earth is flat. Oh,
yeah.
Success.
Put 1 million rubles on that. Sure enough.
Yeah.
Sure enough. I mean, I assume you guys don't think the Earth is.
No. But the point here is that, to your point, right? You don't have to be gullible. You just have to be interested, right? And people are always interested in discovering something, especially now, right? Because what makes a person interested? A lot of reasons why a person might be interested. One of those is that they could believe that being interested betters them or supports them in some kind of way to do more, have more, get more, be better, smarter, appear to be more than what they are at the current time, right? So they cling on to something that can differentiate them from everybody else, but they feel differentiates them from everyone else. And then the second part to that is then flood the information, flood it, just flood all channels with all of this stuff. So everywhere they turn, they're seeing that same piece of information, and then they're starting to believe it.
They think that that information is being fed to everybody. Everyone is seeing that. No, right. It's because the bot farmer has selected them and created a dozen synthetic identities, right? And they're all talking about this. And these synthetic identities have joined your friends group, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody's got, friends, and those friends have friends of friends. Your friends group kind of has no distinct boundaries, right? So some new people come in. It happens all the time. There are always new people coming into my circle of acquaintances, right? Well, these new people aren't real, you know? And
the fascinating thing that you're saying there, Wes, is I think what just to simplify this to the simplest terms, it's basically comes down to there's enough of these synthetic identities and there's enough of these bots out there that all you need to do is to be interested enough in something. And as soon as that is recognized through these breadcrumbs that we're talking about, now you're going to be force-fed as much of that information as you could possibly want through these sources that are online that realize now, okay, now we know what this person's interested in.
And from fake identities, right? Fake.
So I have just coined a term, because I tend to do that. So if you do it the way that Sutton Smith did, back around 2017, it's labor intensive. You've got to create these synthetic identities. You've got to have people with imagination who can put in the work to create a person. My new term is called a Bowky, B-O-W-K-Y. The bot who knows you. Right? Because with AI, all that labor intensiveness goes away. And I can create not just a circle of friends, but I can create a dozen synthetic identities whose only interest is in getting to know you. You are their target.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Well, it's going to happen. I mean, I don't have any evidence for it, but I just know it's going to happen because.
Well, I don't even think
it's
you
simply
need evidence
economics. Why pay all of these bot herders? They tend to be literate and well paid. It costs money when you can just have the number of bots that they can create is limited, whereas an AI can create as many of these as you want.
Well, here's a good example of that. I think, I want to share this piece of information that we had. Talking about synthetic identity fraud, a 35-year-old male from Los Angeles impersonated Demi Moore and reported her no limit American Express card was stolen. Yeah. He then intercepted the replacement card from FedEx location and before it could be delivered to Demi Moore. And over the next 25 days, he went on a lavish spending spree. He bought luxury. He went to retail stores online, luxury retail stores, bought stuff. His charges exceeded $169,000 before Demi Moore noticed and reported it as theft. And then he was later identified as a culprit when federal investigators obtained surveillance videos of him shopping with the stolen car. Now, to illustrate how important this is and how this can happen to anyone, doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or wherever you're at, you are not immune. This can happen anywhere. Your identity can be impersonated and used in.
That's why you need identity certificates.
Yeah, exactly.
PKI, private keys.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Private keys. Tell me how you're going to steal my identity if it's in a private key that's in a device that requires a biometric to release that private key for use.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. See, that's the thing. The solutions to all these things exist. They're old, proven. In fact, we have a video series coming out. It's entitled SHIPS, Authenticity SHIPS, SHIPS, Solutions Hiding in Plain Sight. The thing is that the business of stealing your personal information and selling it through information brokers, we call that industry Syllabandia, Silicon Valley, plus the broadband and media industries, plus their feeders in the dark web, the botnet businesses, and also private equity, venture capital, and cybersecurity industry. I mean, we tell it like it is.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
I don't have entangling alliances. We don't have entangling alliances.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Everybody's got some part of everybody's income has to do with Syllabandia. We're all, reluctant to be too candid about it because, they buy this from me and right? My company, wouldn't like it if I was critical of the venture capital industry, but we gotta face facts. This stuff is not working and the solutions are out there, but they require doing things differently.
Absolutely.
And these thoughts, when PKI was new, you read what people were writing back then, and they had this vision of fixing the world, that's didn't go that way.
Yeah, I didn't quite get there.
No.
Well, guys, we went. We got a lot of content in this first segment, so let's take a quick break.
Boy, did we ever.
Yeah, let's take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll jump back into the next part.
Sounds good.
Sounds great.
Do zero-day exploits and supply chain attacks keep you up at night? Worry no more. You can harden your security with ThreatLocker. Imagine taking a proactive, deny-by-default approach to cybersecurity, blocking every action, process, and user unless specifically authorized by your team. ThreatLocker helps you do this and provides a full audit of every action, allowed or blocked, for risk management and compliance. Onboarding and operation is fully supported by their US-based support team. Stop the exploitation of trusted applications within your organization to keep you running efficiently and secure, protected from ransomware. Worldwide, companies like JetBlue trust ThreatLocker to secure their data and keep their business operations flying high. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can mitigate unknown threats and ensure compliance for your organization, visit threatlocker.com.
Welcome back after the break. Man, as commonly happens, Jason and I say this a lot, when we're off the cameras and we're just conversing, some of the best conversation happens then. So we were talking about some pretty interesting stuff, Wes, And I want to take this into our next segment a little bit and talk about the impact and the implications of how AI are going to at least begin to play a huge role in how we handle and how we tackle online security and online privacy. So, we've all seen how quickly, we all know AI goes back into the 50s, but just since they released ChatGPT, we've seen this boom, this explosion of AI companies come out of nowhere. New technologies are bouncing up daily. And we're starting to see how this is going to play a huge impact in all of our lives. But my real concern here is when it comes to privacy and when it comes to protecting yourself. We've talked about the bots, we've talked about these synthetic personalities, and we've talked about how companies can use this machine learning technology to market to you and to promote content to you specific to your interests, which is really scary. But I'm curious, Wes, you've had some time to kind of watch this unfold the last couple of years. I mean, really, it hit hard towards the end of 2022. What are the ethical implications of this? Are companies going to be more and more responsible? Are governments going to be responsible? Are we really just kind of screwed and need to take the ownership and say, look, I got to protect myself, and this is how I'm going to do it? What's your opinion of where this is all going?
Oh, I think that if we take that approach, we all need to individually protect ourselves. We're screwed. No, as I've been saying,
so the technology is smarter than us.
Pardon me?
The technology is smarter than us, is what we're saying here, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's smarter. Well, okay, we all have people around us that are smarter than ourselves, and they don't necessarily use that brain power to, conquer us. But we need to import things from the world that existed before computers. Things that come from that world. Some may that date from the 50s or something. Okay, they were computers, but they're principles. Like what you mentioned, what we were talking about in the break. There's a well-worn. In fact, in this series of videos, the ship's videos, solutions hiding in plain sight, I looked up the origin of this device, this legal device, that is very helpful when you have a human being that can't be responsible for their own actions. And that's one form of it is called a conservator. Courts appoint a conservator to take legal responsibility for this unaccountable human being. Well, we should have a role called an AI conservator. So if you have an AI that's capable of presenting itself as a human being, they need to be appointed a professionally licensed conservator. It takes responsibility for what this AI does. And as we were talking about, the reasons why someone would want to be a professional licensee, well, they tend to get paid very well. But they could lose that livelihood if they screw up. And that's what accounts for their diligence in doing their job well, right? Because they're making a lot of money, but they could lose that gravy train in an instant if they do the wrong thing. That's what professional licensing is all about. But I mean, how do you start that? Where do we turn for that? Now, Sam Altman, when he appeared before Congress, I guess it was a year and a half ago or 2 years ago or something, was saying, hey, we need to be regulated. OpenAI needs to be regulated. This AI stuff is too powerful. All right, who's going to regulate it? And here in the good old USA, we of 5% of the world's population always assume that if we set a regulation, then that developer in Indonesia is going to say, oh, yes, sir. The USA says this is the way I have to adhere to these standards. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way at all. In fact, people in other parts of the world are often quite amused by that.
I love that the recommendation for regulation came from the guy who let the genie out of the bottle.
Yeah, I know. Well, and it plays a lot of different roles.
Go
right?
regulate it.
There's some commonalities in this because it's like the same thing. We could talk about TikTok as being an example of this, right? Where we keep saying, well, someone needs to get this thing under control because, all of these Americans are using TikTok and all of their information is going to China. Okay, well, who's going to get it under control?
Right. Yeah. Do you know OpenBSD, the operating system?
Yep.
They wanted to use strong encryption, symmetric cryptography.
Yeah.
But it was if you use symmetric keys over, I forget what the length was, some ridiculous thing like 64 bits or something like that. It was called a munition.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It was in the same box along with 150 millimeter howitzer shells, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they moved to Calgary, Alberta, right? I mean, you got your choice of those 180 countries. One of them won't let you export munitions. It's like, really? And that's why, a lot of the best cryptography is done in other countries because years ago we said, if it's good stuff, it must come from the USA, and we can't let the good stuff out beyond our borders. I think a lot of the discord we're experiencing now is a reaction to globalization. Globalization, all big changes in society upset people. And this is no exception. Because let's face it, we live an increasing part of our lives digitally all the time. Here we are, this meeting. Remember, 5 years ago, if you used the word meeting in connection with this activity, people would have been amused. Now, this is what a meeting is, right?
Yeah, this is reality now. Yeah.
Yeah, this is reality. This is it, right? Things have changed, and they changed so fast that people say, oh, no, wait, here's our jurisdiction, our borders of our nation. And meanwhile, these bit streams don't know anything about those borders. I'm not advocating globalization. I'm just saying it's like, I don't know, what's a metaphor, it's like keeping water in a weak container. The walls of the container have a chemical change or something like that. It's going to slosh out. So we live our lives more and more in a globalized space. And it needs a global source of authority. And that bothers a lot of people. It bothers me sometimes, but you have to have it. And so I guess the point is, do it right, go the next step. We had that governance has evolved over the years, right? And it started out, everything was a monarchy and autocracy, and then the Icelandic Constitution and the Magna Carta and all that, and then the U.S. and its balance of powers, right? It can be done right? You can build authority right, so it's participatory, and well structured.
I think one of the values that I heard was, in terms of AI, is that, and what I know of where we are currently with AI and how we're evolving, is that there is a greenfield opportunity for organizations to step in with a variant of their offering. That is to say, we can do an attestation, or we can do a stamp of approval, a review of some sort that says what you currently have in the state that you're using it, with the bots that you're using or the agents you're using, fall within the acceptable practices, and we can stamp that as acceptable. Now, guess what? You're going to change that in a year from now. You're going to need to do that attestation with us again. So we'll do that attestation, and we'll look at all the new bots and agents and use cases that you're using AI for. And if it falls outside of these acceptable ranges, then we'll deny it. And if it falls within it, then we'll approve it. And at a minimum, we have some opportunities there to start rallying around some type of way to control what people are doing and how AI is performing.
So would the NIST AI standards, for example, play into something like that? Is that kind of what you're suggesting?
But who controls it? Who does that? Who's issuing that?
Yeah, we don't have an authority for that yet.
So I cite the StartCom experience again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, well, it'll come out of things like GDPR, and GDPR will say, well, you have to have something that does this, 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 and this. And then organizations will just make up attestations to do that. I mean, that's what's going to happen. It's going to be loose. It's not going to be a tightly governed, practice.
Look at professional licensing. Seriously, one reason why people don't talk a lot about professional licensing, and instead they talk about regulation. It's because professional licensing works so well.
Mm-hmm.
Buildings don't fall down. They tend not to fall down on our heads because there's this professional liability. The architect, contractor, and building inspector all are professionally licensed, and they're all scared. You know what, Liz? If they should lose that license to practice.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. It's not worth it to take shortcuts. It's not worth it to try to skim a few bucks by putting in a secret passageway that doesn't show up on the drawings,
Yeah.
Not worth it.
Yeah.
They're doing well. They're making a lot of money, and it's a fairly undemanding job.
And I could see it like this. I can see the relationship between the two. In my head, I can see this type of relationship, right? As a professional contractor would own how, a professional architect would own how that building is being built. One of the things they are looking at is the materials that are being used and the quality of the material. How are those materials being fashioned and before you go and purchase it and use it within construction? The same thing would have to apply for AI. How are your AI agents being trained? What's under the foundations?
There needs to be a set of building codes. Yeah.
Right.
The only thing is that construction materials evolve fairly slowly compared to the way our digital tools evolved. So
therein lies the problem.
setting materials standards and building codes for something that evolves so fast is tricky. Although, we do have FIPS standards.
Yep.
FIPS 140, and they're taken very seriously. So that's certainly part of it. Yeah. But I still think that the digital world needs to look at some principles that have been developed over centuries and millennia. I started to say before that the conservator role was invented in Rome before the empire, in the days of the Roman Republic. So that would have been, at 400 BC, I think.
Mm-hmm.
These are very old ideas. Professional licensing is a very old idea. Here's another one for you. What is a site? What is a site? We have these things called websites. What is a site? A site is an outdoor spot where a building is to be built. Okay, the web is what? The web is the finished layers on what? The internet. It's the signage and the lines on the road. What is the internet? Well, it used to be called an information highway. What's a highway? An outdoor public transport system. We're doing our banking outdoors on a billboard. A browser is a billboard. Whose idea was that? Right? We got these things called sites. That's where a building is supposed to go. What is a building? A building is a set of accountability spaces, right? Isn't accountability what we need, right? You tend to know who's in the room with you in a building, right? That's why we have buildings. Besides climate control and keeping the rain off our heads, it's accountability. Our residence is a building. We know who's in it, who's allowed to go into it. Even when we're not there, we know that the cleaning person is allowed to come in. Buildings are sets of accountability spaces. Why do we do everything outdoors? Why are we living in cardboard boxes by the side of the information highway?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought.
It's definitely a different way to look at it, but
so let's move in to some takeaways as we start to close this episode out. And so I thought it'd be good to dive into a few things that we can give back to the audience. And a lot of what we talked about tonight was at a larger, higher level of authorization, foundationally or organizationally being applied so that everyone benefits, and to some capacity. You might have to volunteer into it, but at some capacity, everyone could benefit from it. And when I say foundational, I mean from the basics of what needs to happen for fundamental change to happen within technology to keep things safe. What I'm referring to with these takeaways is what are some of the individual things that the individual user can do today, because they're not going to go out and just change the world tomorrow and all take part of these foundational changes. So some of the ones that come to mind are the obvious ones. VPN access, at least when you're getting on this information highway, as Wes was referring to, and you're traveling in your cardboard car down this information highway, that you have some layer of protection. Share less information. Don't overshare on social media. People constantly.
Ooh, that's a hard one for most people, isn't it?
I know, man. It's just vomit information all over the socials. And then next thing you know, they don't know why they're being hit up with all these ads about something that they never said anything about, except the 20 times they said it.
Yeah.
Another one would be monitor your personal online data, do credit reports, identity protection services, but anything that can give you insights into something going wrong on your behalf online. Two-factor authentication at a minimum, right? MFA across the board. If you don't know what MFA is by now, you're probably already compromised really bad. So you start trying to get some MFA applied. Another common one is do your software updates. You have a personal computer, and if you're not automatically applying updates on that machine, then you're probably at more risk than you believe you are. And be looking for things like if you see a news announcement, like Apple does this often, right? Apple will push out updates, and here you have an update ready to go tonight. Do you want to run it? And how often do people just sit on that instead of applying it? Many times the reason why they're doing that is because there's a 0-day attack that they have know about or that they perceive is going to happen, and they want to protect you before it happens. And so waiting on it would be a bad idea. So apply your patches when you get them. So Kevin, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first off, I think patches are not convenient, Jason, so I would prefer to delay them as long as possible. Or
Of course you would.
No, seriously though, that is a bigger issue than people realize, simply for that reason. These software vendors are going out of their way to patch a problem and tell you about it because it's a huge security flaw. The problem with that is, as soon as they've made that patch public, well, guess who else knows about that flaw? Every malicious actor out there that's looking for those types of things. So, yeah, I mean, to your point, Jason, if you're not patching regularly, that's one of the low-hanging fruit things that anybody can be doing and should be doing. Some other ones that came to mind for me are the password vaults. A lot of people struggle with this. We've all been guilty of this. If we're being completely honest, we've reused passwords on more than one website, and just because our password was good and strong, we thought we were being more secure and it was okay to reuse it. It's really not. The challenge, though, becomes if you start using multiple passwords across different websites, you have to remember what they are, right? Well, there's a solution now that makes that a lot easier. It's called a password manager, password vault. Look into it. If you're not using one, you should be. And it's way more secure than storing all your passwords and caching them in your browser or storing them in a spreadsheet. While on the topic,
except one of those
of passwords and password vaults, strong passwords. Obviously, the longer the password is, the harder it is to crack it. So
hold on a second, Kevin.
What's that?
What were you gonna say?
Well, two things about password vaults. One is that a major one was compromised recently.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, and also, but to my mind, a bigger concern is with a password manager. Typically, unless you're using an identity certificate, the whole thing, all your password store is gated by, guess what? A password.
Oh, yeah.
And if someone gets that password,
keys to the kingdom, right?
You start over with your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to that point, I was going to head into the strength of passwords, because if you're not saving long passwords that can't be systematically cracked, you're already at a disadvantage, even if you are using a password manager, because the password manager itself isn't the only thing that's protecting you. Your common sense in creating a strong password is also protecting you. Keep the key that opens up the vault to all your other keys hidden away. In other words, make it super strong, super long, super hard to remember, or not to remember, but to crack. I always say opt for something long that's easier to remember, like a passphrase. So think of a funny sentence with funny words that you're not going to forget. That's an easy way to remember long passwords. What are some others? If you get an email from someone and it seems weirdly suspicious, pick up a phone, call that person, say, hey, did you send me this unusual email? I know this is uncommon for you, so maybe I should check this more of a face-to-face type method, as opposed to just responding to the email, hey, this isn't really you, is it? Obviously, if it's a hacker, they're going to say, of course it's me. send me the data that I just asked you for. So anyway, that's just a few that I come up with. I don't know if you guys have any others, but those are the ones that came to mind.
I have a story.
Yeah.
So I go to the RSA and AGC security conferences every year, one coming up in San Francisco, and occasionally Black Hat. And there are a lot of parties there, right? I go to the parties and I'll be sitting with a CISSP. I'll have a beer or two. And I will, at some point, and I know this is terribly disingenuous, shoot me. I will say, Fred, I have to admit, I've clicked on a bad link. I've clicked on a bad attachment. Over 50% of the time, the person I'm talking to, the security expert, says, yeah, I know, I've done that too. All right. So these are the people who are who are educating the
masses,
misinformed in their organization how to not get phished, and they get phished.
Yeah.
So
yep.
It is very.
I'm sorry, but PKI start over. PKI identity certificates, measurably reliable identities. We got to do it right. It's the vision from way back in the 80s, and I think that we can't get the whole world on board with this, but what we can do is create a core of people who say, yeah, I'm concerned enough about my privacy, my security. I will make the leap and I'll join this little club, and maybe the club will grow from there.
That is a very good segue. So as we close out this session, Wes, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I want to remind our audience about Authenticity Institute and the work that you're doing there. I want to remind them about your books, Quiet Enjoyment and The Future Needs You. So look those up, everyone. And to Wes's point, building this next generation of true security and authentication requires people to participate. So please look into the things that we've talked about tonight. If you feel compelled to want to start to participate in some of the programs that we refer to that Wes has talked about tonight, please look into those and help move this type of technology forward so that we can all start to get to a better place in security.
May I suggest go to authentiverse.net. Authentiverse.net.
Okay, perfect.
And Wes, before we close up, one last thing. If any of the listeners would like to find you online, do you have any social media that they can go look you up on or find you? Where would they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, all the majors. I don't spend much time on Instagram, but LinkedIn. And as I say, authentiverse.net. And if you volunteer your email to join our mail list, our opt-in list, and mention that you'd like to hear from me, you will hear from me.
Excellent.
Great.
Well, with that, we'll go ahead and close this one up. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And until the next one, take care.
See ya.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you for watching our latest episode of the Cyber Distortion Podcast. We only grow with your support. The best thing you can do to help us grow is to subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, follow us on X, and tell just one friend about the show. You can find out more about us on the blog site at www.cyberdistortion.com. Our X handle is @DistortionCyber, and you can also listen to our audio-only versions of the episodes on most major streaming podcast platforms. Just search for Cyber Distortion Podcast. Until next time, take care. Cheers.